Britain keeps producing prehistoric discoveries that make the simple Stonehenge story harder to maintain. For most of the last century, the question was always the same. How did people with no metal, no wheel, and no written language raise a ring of 25-ton stones on an empty chalk plain? And for most of that century, there was no real answer, only theories and a shrug. In the last few years, that has changed. Science has finally started to answer parts of the question. And every answer has made the monument stranger, not simpler. Because the breakthroughs did not come from the stones standing in the open. They came from inside them. From a fragment drilled out of one stone in the 1950s and posted back from Florida 60 years later. From mineral grains crushed out of the slab lying at the dead center of the circle. From a buried ring of shafts no one knew existed until a survey crossed what looked like an empty field. What they revealed is this. The great stones were dragged from one place, the smaller stones from another, far away. And the single most important stone at the heart of Stonehenge came from somewhere no one had ever seriously proposed. The discovery does not solve the mystery. It widens it. Start with where it sits. Stonehenge stands on Salisbury Plain, in Wiltshire, in the south of England, near the town of Amesbury, around 90 miles southwest of London. Open chalk grassland in every direction. The monument rises out of it with no obvious reason for being there. No quarry nearby, no mountain, no river running past the stones themselves. Just flat ground and a ring of rock that has refused to explain itself for 5,000 years. Look at what it is made of, because this is where the modern science begins. The outer ring and the great central settings are built from sarsen, an extremely hard silcrete sandstone. The largest sarsens stand up to 7 meters tall and weigh in the region of 20 to 25 tons. They are capped with horizontal lintels, and those lintels are locked in place with real carpentry joints, mortise, and tenon. Tongue and groove, the kind cut into furniture, carved here into some of the hardest stone in Britain by people who had no metal to cut with. For more than 300 years, no one could say where the sarsens came from. They are too uniform to fingerprint easily. The answer came in 2020, published in the journal Science Advances, by a team led by geomorphologist David Nash, working with English Heritage. The break came from an unlikely place. In the 1950s, a core had been drilled out of one upright, known as Stone 58, during repair work. That core left the country and ended up in the United States. Decades later, it was returned, and for the first time, researchers could analyze the inside of a Stonehenge sarsen and destroy a small piece of it to read its full chemistry. They tested every standing sarsen non-destructively first. Most shared the same chemical signature. Then they sampled sarsen outcrops across southern Britain, from Norfolk to Devon, and looked for the match. There was one, a wooded area called West Woods, on the edge of the Marlborough Downs, around 15 miles north of the monument. Researchers arrived, expecting the stones might come from anywhere across a wide region. The chemistry showed them something tighter. The builders appeared to have gone to one source, and the priority was size. They wanted the biggest, most substantial stones they could find, and they took them from as close as those stones existed. What remains uncertain is why that exact spot among many sarsen fields, and 2 of the sarsens do not match Westwoods at all. Their source has still not been located. Now hold that idea, the idea of practical local sourcing, because the next set of stones breaks it completely. Inside the sarsen ring sits a second group, the bluestones. They are smaller, some weighing only a few tons, and they are not local to Salisbury Plain in any sense. The igneous bluestones have been traced to the Preseli Hills in Pembrokeshire, in southwest Wales, around 150 miles away. This is not a guess. Excavations led by Mike Parker Pearson identified actual quarry sites in those hills. At an outcrop called Carn Godog, the dolerite source. At another, called Craig Rosie Phelan, the rhyolite, researchers found the worked rock faces, the wedges, the platforms where stones were lowered down. The stones were taken out by hand, on purpose, and moved the length of much of southern Britain. What is established is this. The bluestones traveled around 150 miles. What remains uncertain is why. Sarsen was bigger, stronger, and right next door. Something about the Welsh stones was worth crossing a country for. Some researchers have argued for a connection to the place itself, a sacred origin. Others have proposed the stones were believed to hold healing properties. The question is still open. And then there is the stone in the middle. At the dead center of the monument lies a single recumbent slab, around 5 meters long, weighing close to 6 tons. It is called the altar stone. For over 100 years, it was assumed to be Welsh, like the bluestones. Recent work first ruled out a Welsh origin entirely. Then, in 2024, a study published in the journal Nature, led by Anthony Clark of Curtin University with colleagues at Aberystwyth and University College London, analyzed the age and chemistry of mineral grains inside fragments of the stone. The match was not in Wales. It was not anywhere near it. The chemistry pointed to the Orcadian Basin, in the far northeast of Scotland, more than 700 kilometers away, the longest journey known for any stone of that age in Britain. One of the researchers called it a genuinely shocking result. A 6-ton slab, the length of the island, 5,000 years ago. The discovery does not close the story. It blows it open, because now the question is not only how they moved the stones, but how a society that left no writing organized a journey of that scale, and why the heart of the most famous monument in Britain was reserved for a stone hauled almost the entire way from Scotland. Follow-up work has narrowed the debate without ending it. Researchers have argued the stone was probably not carried south by glacial ice, which points back toward human transport, by sea or by land. But the route is unknown. The method is unknown. What is established is the source. What remains uncertain is everything about the journey. By this point, the pattern is becoming clear. Stonehenge was never assembled from whatever was lying nearby. It was deliberately built from stone gathered across the whole of Britain, and that scale of organization should make us look harder at the ground around it. So look at the ground around it. Stonehenge does not stand alone, and it never did. Running from the monument is an ancient earthwork called the Avenue, nearly 3 kilometers long, aligned on the axis of the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset, leading down to the River Avon. At the river end of that avenue, in 2009, the Stonehenge Riverside Project found the buried remains of another small stone circle, now called Blue Stonehenge. The water was part of the design. Follow the river upstream, and you reach Durrington Walls, around 2 miles northeast. It is one of the largest henge enclosures in Britain. So big, it is sometimes called a superhenge, and it was a settlement. Researchers found evidence of enormous feasting there, and isotope analysis of the animal bones showed pigs and cattle had been brought in from across Britain to be eaten on that spot. Beside it stands Woodhenge, a monument of timber rings rather than stone. This led Parker Pearson to a striking interpretation. 2 linked worlds. Durrington, built of timber, full of the living and their feasts. Stonehenge, built of stone, holding the dead and the ancestors. Joined by the river and the avenues. 2 halves of a single ceremonial landscape. And that landscape is older than the famous stones. Cutting across it is the Stonehenge Cursus, a long earthwork enclosure roughly 3 kilometers long, built centuries before the Sarsen Circle went up. People were marking this ground long before they raised a single great stone on it. Then, in 2020, the ground gave up something no one expected. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project, led by Vince Gaffney with teams from Bradford, Vienna, and St. Andrews, was surveying the empty space around Durrington with geophysics. The instruments kept finding the same thing: large pits, shafts, up to 10 meters or more across and around 5 meters deep. And they were not random. They form a vast ring, more than 2 kilometers across, encircling Durrington walls and Woodhenge. Radiocarbon dating placed them around 2500 BC. Britain's largest prehistoric structure, sitting in one of the most studied landscapes on Earth. And no one had seen it until the survey crossed the field. Researchers are still trying to explain it. Some of the features may be natural hollows in the chalk that were modified and incorporated. The degree of intention is debated, but follow-up work through 2025 reinforced that at least 16 massive pits form a near-perfect ring on a scale that argues for deliberate design. Whether it marked a boundary, a sacred edge, or something with no modern equivalent, the question is still open. There is one more thread, and it runs through the people themselves. Stonehenge is, among other things, one of the largest late Neolithic cremation cemeteries known in Britain. Burnt human remains were placed in and around the ring of 56 pits just inside the bank, the Aubrey holes, named for the antiquarian John Aubrey, who recorded them in the 17th century. And when researchers analyzed the chemistry of some of those cremated remains in a 2018 study, several of the individuals carried signatures that did not match the local chalk. They were consistent instead with Western Britain, with the same direction as the Welsh bluestones. The stones came from far away. So, it seems, did some of the people buried with them. So, what was Stonehenge for? The honest answer is that several explanations are still in play, and the evidence does not crown one. It may have been a great gathering place, a monument that pulled scattered communities together and helped unify them. It may have been, above all, a monument to the ancestors and the dead, the stone counterpart to the timber world of the living. It is clearly tied to the sky, locked onto the solstice axis with real precision. And it may have been a place of healing, a destination people traveled to in hope. These are not rivals so much as layers. The monument was used, altered, and reinterpreted across more than 1,000 years, and it likely meant different things to different generations who inherited it. Which brings us back to the stone in the middle. The altar stone, carried more than 700 kilometers from northeast Scotland, set down at the center of everything, and then buried under the collapse of the stones around it, where it lay unread for 5,000 years, until someone crushed a few of its grains and asked where they were born. That single result reframes the whole monument. It tells us these were not isolated farmers raising a local shrine. It tells us prehistoric Britain was connected across its entire length, organized enough to move the immovable, and bound by something strong enough to make that journey worth it. We now know where the stone came from. We still do not know how it got there or what it meant to stand at the heart of the circle. The discovery does not solve the mystery. It makes it larger. Britain's prehistoric record is not a fixed story. It is a landscape still being read, one core sample, one survey, one buried ring of shafts at a time. Stonehenge may be the most famous part of it, but it was never the whole thing. And the more closely it is studied, the less alone it stands. If one of these discoveries changed how you see ancient Britain, leave it in the comments. Subscribe for more ancient sites that keep rewriting what researchers thought they knew.